Back, everyone, to Einstein's Eyes. Carl Rosen here, Oculoplastics, NeuroOp, Anchorage, Alaska. My friend and partner, former colleague in residency at Albert Einstein, Jon Ditkoff. John's gonna say hello.
Hello, everybody. My practice is in New Jersey. I'm a cornea specialist, do general ophthalmology. Been doing it for almost 30 years, along with, like Carl. And today I'm in New York, actually. I'm in the city.
I'm jealous. We got tons of snow here in Alaska. A little too
Oh,
much.
did you?
Oh my
That's very
God,
cool.
John. There's so much snow you would not believe.
Really?
Yeah.
How do you get to work? How do you get to work?
Not easy, man. Not easy. I mean,
What
I
do you
have an all-wheel drive. I drive an all-wheel drive. I have a Lexus, but yeah,
Nice.
it's not fun. My wife is a Tahoe, so she
That's
uses
nice.
that, and that does pretty well. But that's another YouTube. We'll talk about that.
Yeah.
So this one is private equity, nuts and bolts of private equity, and John's really gonna dive into it and talk about it from a granular level, from a physician office perspective, and how it impacts the physician's office and trickles down to the patients. So private equity has pros and cons. I'm not here to judge. You know, your goals are different than my goals, than John's goals, but there is definitely a stratification of interests. Seems to be better for older docs that have built this and created it, and then are looking for a way to retire or exit. And the private equity has their own interest because they have limited partners, they have capital, they have investors that they have to answer to, and they want to see a return on their investment. So, John, in the previous video, we talked about leverage buyout, and that's the instrument, or the debt instrument that they use. Again, it is a debt instrument based on the practice's assets, which is a very interesting way to increase your annual yield and the deployed capital by borrowing against secured borrowing on the practice's assets. But that was the previous video. Today, we're going to talk about a perspective from the physician office and the patient perspective. So, John, why don't you talk about that?
So I think the best way to understand private equity for me was to think about why it even exists. What made it occur? And I think it's very simple. Like especially in New Jersey, I don't know about other states, but insurance companies somewhat have a monopoly. There's not that many health insurance companies anymore. So they have control. So an average doctor like myself in a relatively large practice, 20 years ago, 15 years ago, we're at the mercy of the health insurance companies. So they were paying us less and less on the dollar, meaning the dollar is what Medicare gives us. A lot of my patients think, oh, Medicare pays less. It actually pays more in New Jersey. So what would happen is if I had an encounter with a patient, Medicare might pay me $100, let's say. Aetna, United, Oxford, Horizon, not that many carriers will pay me $60 for the same encounter. So private practice became very difficult because you're getting underpaid, undercompensated, with overhead going up, salaries going up, the insurance companies are controlling you. So what happened? Private equity came around, and there is some benefit to it. The benefit was private equity would collect a bunch of practices, they would gain market share, then they would go back to a new company like Aetna or Horizon. They could negotiate better rates. We couldn't do that on our own. That's impossible. You know, some 3-doctor, 5-doctor, 8-doctor practice, they don't care. But now they could go to them with 100 doctors, 200 doctors, and a network of doctors and say, listen, you're undercompensating us. So because of that, they would get higher rates. And that principle works, meaning if private equity comes into a bunch of internist practices that are having trouble surviving in solo practice, and they combine them and they put them all in one building, and they also have a lot of staff that understand billing and making sure they go after the insurance companies. That was the concept, and that makes sense. So what happens practically speaking? So practically speaking, private equity firm will come to a practice like mine, and they'll say, listen, you have this much net revenue, and whatever your net revenue is, let's say your net revenue is $1 million. So they say, okay, we're going to give you a multiple of that. However, we're going to continue to pay you. So they're going to pay you 30% of what you collect per year. So to make that $1 million, let's say I am bringing in $2 million. By the way, this is not my practice. This is hypothetical. So let's say I'm collecting $2 million to bring in to make $1 million. So I have a 50% overhead. They're going to buy my practice and they're going to say to me, okay, well, we're going to give you on the $1 million, which is the net revenue, we're not going to pay you the multiple on that. We're going to pay you a multiple on $1 million minus what we're going to pay you. And we're going to pay you 30% of what you bring in, which is $600,000. So now you're down to $400,000 because it's $2 million collection, $1 million net revenue, but they need to pay me $600,000 instead of $1 million. So now what do they do with that $400,000? They're very, very generous. They say, we're going to give you a multiple, 6 times, 8 times, 10 times. That really depends on how valuable you are. If you're part of a huge group, they might give you 10 times. If you're a solo guy, they might not be interested, or they might give you 5 times. But whatever it is, they're giving you a 5-time multiple just on the $400,000, not on the $1 million worth of net profit. So now, let's say they give you, let's dream, we'll give them 10 times multiple of $400,000. That's $4 million. They're giving you $4 million outright, and now they're going to pay you 600 grand instead of $1 million. So you're making less money, but you got all this money up front. So the nice concept for a doctor is, well, I just got $4 million and I can pay capital gains on it, not income tax. So I get to keep more of it, but I'm giving up complete control of my practice.
Right.
So that's the second part of this conversation. What does it do to the doctor? What does it do to the patient? I know some doctors that are very happy with it. And to Carl's point, they were generally a little bit more mature, a little bit older. They weren't doing well. They were working harder and harder and harder to make less and less and less every year. They felt like they were losing control over their patients anyway because the insurance companies had them. Now they're part of an entity that has more control over the insurance company. They don't have to deal with a lot of headaches. And they just know they're getting 30% of their collections. And that's they don't have to worry about it. So that's the nice part. And because the private equity was able to negotiate higher rates, theoretically, if they were bringing in $2 million a year, now they're bringing in $3 million a year. So they get 30%, they get 30% of $3 million, which is more money than when they were making. So it should be a win-win. The problem is that the insurance companies don't always get such better rates. The second problem is when they don't get the rates, well, how are they going to make more money? Well, now they got to cut staff. And that's how it affects the doctor and it affects the patients. So as a doctor, if you're used to seeing a certain amount of patients per hour with a very large staff, they don't care. Their attitude is, we're going to cut your staff. You can work harder to make the same amount of money. We're still just paying you 30%. That's not costing us anything. It's costing us money to support you to see more people per hour. So that's the problem with the formula. The other problem with the formula is, again, if they don't get better rates, they have to let go of staff. How does that impact the patients? So we all know this. Patients are having trouble reaching their doctors. They feel like they've lost that personal relationship because now the doctor comes to work, he leaves, he doesn't own the practice anymore. It's not his entity. If he's not happy, he can go practice in Alaska. He can go to California. It's not the same. It's not his baby. So the patients are complaining to me. Now, by the way, I'm not in private equity, but they're complaining to me. And I'm a patient too. I go to doctors that have private. The doctors are wonderful. They're caring. They're considerate. They're just as knowledgeable. They're just as good as surgeons. The problem is they don't have the staff that they used to have, and they're frustrated. So I think it's really a difficult thing. I think if a doctor is 65 years old and he wants to practice 2 to 5 years, great. If he's a young doctor coming out, maybe the opportunities aren't there. That middle-aged doctor, the 45 to 50, probably not a good move because you're giving up what you built, for 15 years. And you look forward to building up your practice and your patients building and everything like that. So it's very difficult times in medicine. I mean, I think it's difficult. I think it's very hard because the insurance companies pushed it too much. I think that's why doctors had no choice but to join entities like private equity.
Right. So this is super interesting, and we're gonna know what the fallout is over the next few years. If and this will again affect healthcare policy, and it'll affect patient care. When it affects enough people, then the legislature gets involved, and then it really starts. People start talking about policy and making changes in public policy and healthcare policy. So we'll
Yeah, that's a
see.
good point.
We'll see when that happens. Most likely, if the actual if an actual politician or legislature gets affected or their family gets affected, then we'll start seeing,
Well, I'm sure it's happening because we all, as we're patients.
yeah,
And I say to myself, nowadays I need a colonoscopy, I need something else, I need routine care. Uh, in New Jersey, there's less and less choice. Like, there's a lot of doctors, but they're all under one umbrella or another umbrella or another umbrella. And it's not the same.
yeah,
It's, my dad was a family doctor.
yeah,
Pick up the phone,
yeah,
make appointments.
yeah,
Now, do I do that? Probably not.
yeah,
But in my office, we answer the phone.
yeah,
I hope to say that 10 years from now. I hope to say that we answer the phone because we want to know what's going on with our patients.
yeah,
Try calling an office that has private equity and see if a live person answers the phone.
yeah. No,
If you find one, that's very unusual. I think it's really a new world.
yeah, it is in the world. I mean, and there's different players in medicine now too that you'll see. So that's a whole nother topic. But
And then one last point. So Carl and I have known each other a long time. We both worked together in our training. I can say for Carl, and I think he could say for me, we went into medicine for the right reason. We went in to wanted to help people. We wanted a skill that we really felt would be important in our society. And we still have that skill no matter what. We also wanted to make a living. I don't want to discount that at all. But that wasn't the priority. The priority was you wake up in the morning, help people, do a good deed, and also make a living. When private equity runs your business and runs your practice and runs the practice where you're going to see a patient, where you're a patient, you have to remember, and I'm not saying they're bad people. They're not doctors, though. They're in it for one reason alone. How can they show a profit? How can they show enough profit that that entity becomes more valuable and then sell it? That's the goal. That's their job. That's what they're hired to do. That's very different. And I think that's what scares me as a patient, because I think there's a disconnect. Like it used to be doctors, these solo guys, they went to work every day. They loved what they did. If they worked an extra couple of hours that day, so be it. They took care of patients and they made them better. It's very different when you have private equity, that their job, when they go to a meeting and their boss meets with them, they don't say, how's your patients doing? How are your outcomes? How's your surgery skills? Your patients love you. No. It's, are you making more profit this year?
right.
And how'd you do it?
It's a different culture, man. Different culture. Yeah. So John, again, we'll see how it pans out, if it's reflected in analysis and changes in healthcare policy. If it comes down from the government, it gets mandated. That's when we know it's impacted enough people. So John, brilliant. Thank you for that. Thank you for all who've listened, and we'll see you on the next video.
Hopefully we'll have more than 100 people listening.
That's right. Thanks, guys. Okay. Have a great holiday.